It began with a phone call. Ethan McGrath had just stepped out of a cab in front of a crumbling Victorian-style house on Ashford Lane, a house wrapped in vines and silence, when his phone vibrated. He answered without checking the caller ID, distracted by the eerie stillness that surrounded the house. "Ethan," the voice said, breathless, panicked. "Don't go inside." Then the line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, his brow furrowing. No name, no number, just static. He turned back to the house. The reason he'd driven 2 states over? The house his estranged uncle left him in his will, the one no one in the family wanted. It was supposed to be empty for years, abandoned after a string of bizarre incidents. Ethan, a struggling content creator with a dwindling audience, saw an opportunity. "Man spends 30 nights in haunted house. What could go wrong?" He'd told his subscribers. Now, staring at the rotting porch and flickering attic light, he wondered if he'd miscalculated. The front door creaked open without a touch. He stepped inside. The air was damp and cold, smelling of mildew and something fouler, like wet copper and decay. Dust swirled in his flashlight's beam, dancing in the stagnant air. The floorboards groaned under his boots. "Hello?" he called out, half joking, half terrified. No answer. He walked through the entryway, noting the ornate staircase on the right and the hallway that stretched into darkness. Portraits lined the walls, their eyes strangely lifelike, following his every move. One painting had a scratch across the canvas, right where the figure's mouth should have been. The living room was cloaked in sheets and silence. He pulled the covers off furniture, revealing clawfoot chairs and a grand fireplace. On the mantel was a black and white photo of a family. His family, though he didn't recognize the others. Only Uncle Richard, standing stiffly with a hand on the shoulder of a small, pale boy with hollow eyes. Ethan shivered. He moved upstairs, camera rolling. He planned to document everything. The night sounds, the creaks, the whispers. The attic was last. Dust clung to everything like a second skin. In the far corner was a child's rocking horse. It moved slightly when he approached, though the air was still. Behind it, a door. Small, wooden, barely visible. He tugged it open. The space beyond was pitch black. A smell hit him, fetid and thick. He turned on his flashlight and saw scratch marks, deep gouges on the inside of the tiny room, like someone or something had tried to claw its way out. That night, Ethan set up his bed in the second-floor bedroom. Cameras in every corner, mic near the door, night vision in the hallway. He was ready. Around 2:47 a.m., a loud bang jolted him awake. He checked the cameras. Nothing, just static on the hallway cam. Then a soft creak outside the door. He held his breath. The handle turned slightly, just a twitch, but enough to make his heart slam against his ribs. He burst out of the room, brandishing a flashlight, yelling into the dark. No one there. But on the floor, muddy footprints, small, barefoot, child-sized. They led down the hall and vanished at the top of the stairs. He followed, whispering curses until he reached the attic door. It was wide open. The rocking horse sat in the center, slowly moving. "If someone's messing with me, it's not funny," he called. But no voice returned, just the soft creak of the wood. That morning, reviewing the footage, he found something chilling. At 2:48 a.m., the hallway cam flickered, then resumed. In the background, a figure stood motionless behind him. A boy in old-fashioned clothes, eyes black and empty, mouth stitched shut. Ethan hadn't seen it, hadn't felt it, but the camera did. And then there was a whisper, barely audible. He enhanced the audio. It said, "Let us out." That day, Ethan drove into town searching for records. He visited the local archive, dusty and forgotten like the house. The librarian, an old woman with clouded eyes, hesitated when he mentioned the address. "That house, it's hungry," she muttered. She pulled a file wrapped in twine, marked with a red X. Inside, photos of missing children, dates going back over a century. All lived on or near Ashford Lane. Most were never found. One image caught his eye, a boy with a scar on his cheek. The same one from the photo on the fireplace. "That's Joseph," the librarian whispered. "Richard's brother. He vanished in that house. They say he still cries at night." Ethan left with the file, heart pounding. He had a story now. Too real, too dark. That night he tried to leave. Packed up, cameras, clothes, everything. But when he stepped outside, the world changed. The house was surrounded by fog. No moon, no stars. Just a wall of gray. He walked down the driveway. 10 steps. 20. 50. Still fog. Still house behind him. He turned around. He was back at the porch. No matter where he went, he was still inside the boundary. The house wouldn't let him leave. That night the dreams began. Screams. Blood. Children dragging themselves across the floor. A boy whispering in his ear. Cold breath on his neck. "You live here now." He woke to find the attic door open again. A note on his bed, written in shaky handwriting. "Feed us." Ethan realized then, this wasn't about a haunting. This was about hunger, and he was the meal. Ethan didn't sleep after that. His body trembled with a primal fear he couldn't shake, and every creak of the house sounded like a warning, a threat. The note that said, "Feed us," remained on the bedside table, curling at the edges like it had been there for years, though he knew it hadn't been. He had touched it, smelled it. The faint scent of something rotting lingered on the paper, like decayed teeth or moldy bread. He burned it in the fireplace just before dawn, but even the flames seemed reluctant to consume it. The ashes danced like embers possessed, forming words he couldn't read before vanishing up the chimney. The next morning, Ethan tried again to leave. He packed a backpack, clutched his car keys like a lifeline, and stepped outside. The fog was gone. The sun shone weakly through broken clouds, and for a moment, he dared to believe the curse was broken. He reached his car, dead. The battery drained. The engine wouldn't even click. He popped the hood, but everything looked fine, untouched, undamaged. Then he turned around, and there it was again. The boy, standing in the front window, staring down at him. Same pale face, same stitched mouth. Ethan dropped the hood with a metallic clang and stumbled back. The boy blinked and vanished. Inside the house, the lights began to flicker. His phone had stopped working the night before, but now it buzzed in his pocket. A message appeared on the cracked screen. "Bring them." No sender, no context, just two words that filled Ethan's lungs with ice. Bring who? To what? He turned back toward the house, which now felt less like a home and more like a living creature watching him from every angle. He spent the day going room by room, camera in hand, documenting everything. The house shifted subtly when he moved. Hallways seemed longer. Doors that were closed an hour ago were now wide open. In the dining room, he found something that hadn't been there before. A child's shoe, old and dirty, placed in the center of the long table. A name was stitched inside the tongue. Abigail. He picked it up, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. His breath fogged in front of him. Then he heard it, a soft humming, a lullaby, just beyond the edge of comprehension, floating from the walls like a memory trying to resurface. That night, as the sun dipped behind skeletal trees, he locked every door, barricaded the attic, and set up his cameras again. Around 1:30 a.m., the whispers began, low at first like distant murmurs, then rising into desperate pleading. He checked the monitor. The attic camera was black. He flipped to the hallway cam and froze. There, slowly crawling across the ceiling, was a figure, thin, emaciated, with limbs too long and head tilted unnaturally to one side. It moved silently, spider-like, toward the attic. And then, the attic door opened, though it had been nailed shut. He ran upstairs, camera shaking in his hand. The door creaked, swung open by some invisible force, and inside the attic, he saw it. Not the boy, not a ghost, something else, something older. At first, it looked like a collection of shadows, but then the shapes moved independently. Multiple children, translucent, circling a central figure cloaked in darkness. Their mouths were open in silent screams. Ethan stepped back, heart pounding so loud he thought it might burst. The central figure turned toward him. Two glowing eyes opened in the blackness. "You're not enough," it said in a voice that echoed with 1,000 broken whispers. "Bring more." The attic door slammed shut, and Ethan fell backward down the stairs. He woke on the floor, bruised and bleeding, sometime after dawn. The cameras had been destroyed, every file erased. Only one video remained, a still image of him sleeping, the boy standing at the foot of the bed. That day, desperate for answers, Ethan returned to the archives. The librarian wasn't there. The building was locked, abandoned. He banged on the door until someone across the street came out. An old man. He squinted at Ethan. "The library's been closed for 5 years," the man said. "That place is cursed. Ever since Mary Wendell disappeared." Ethan's blood ran cold. "The librarian?" The man nodded. "Said she saw the house breathing, said the children screamed in her dreams. Then she vanished, just like the others." Ethan asked about the boy. The man's face darkened. "Joseph McGrath, your great-uncle's little brother. He didn't just disappear, he was taken. They say he opened the door." "What door?" Ethan asked. "The one beneath the house," the man whispered. "The one that should never be opened." Back at the house, Ethan searched the basement. It was colder there, the air thick with rot. He moved boxes, knocked on walls until he heard it, a hollow echo from beneath a rusted drain in the floor. He pried it open, revealing a staircase that descended into blackness. The air that rose from the hole was warm and putrid, as if something below had just exhaled. He hesitated, but the word pulsed in his head like a heartbeat. "Bring them." That night the house moaned. Floorboards shifted, walls groaned. The hallway stretched longer than before. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the attic door. And then, just before dawn, a knock. Not from the door, but from inside the walls. He pressed his ear to the plaster. A voice whispered through, "We're hungry." He didn't know who "we" was. He didn't want to know. But something in the house did. Something waited. Something watched. And it would not wait much longer. The knocking inside the walls became relentless. It moved from room to room as if something, no, many things, were crawling within the bones of the house, searching for a way out, or maybe for a way in. Ethan didn't know which terrified him more. He hadn't eaten in over 24 hours, and sleep came in short, suffocating bursts haunted by dreams that felt more like memories. Bloody handprints on the nursery walls, shadows dancing in the attic, a face watching him through the mirror that looked just like his butt with no eyes. He awoke to the sound of static. Every speaker in the house, even the ones long disconnected, hummed with it. Then came the voice, layered and broken like a corrupted tape recording. "You opened the breath. Now let us feed." Ethan ran to the basement, flashlight in hand. The rusted drain cover had been moved, and the foul-smelling passage beneath it now glowed faintly with a sickly red light. He descended, each creaking stair groaning under his weight as if warning him to turn back. At the bottom, the stone tunnel opened wide, and the walls pulsed as if alive. He moved cautiously, the light from his flashlight flickering, catching glimpses of carvings etched into the stone. Symbols not from any language he knew. Twisted faces, screaming in silent agony, hands clawing at nothing. A sound echoed ahead. Laughter, children's laughter, high-pitched, wrong. He turned a corner and froze. Before him stood a door, an old wooden slab covered in handprints, small, red-stained handprints that twitched slightly as if fresh. The laughter stopped. Silence returned, crushing and absolute. Then the door opened by itself. What lay beyond was not a room, it was a void, a place without light, without shape, and from it came something, not footsteps, not breathing, but a feeling, hunger. Something old and ravenous stirred. He slammed the door shut and fled back up the stairs. But the house had changed again. The basement now opened into a hallway he didn't recognize. The wallpaper here was torn and crawling with insects. A grandfather clock at the end of the corridor ticked backward. He heard his name whispered from a vent. Ethan. But it wasn't his voice. It was his mother's. She had been dead for 10 years. He bolted, turning corner after corner, until he burst into what should have been the kitchen. But instead, he stood in a nursery. The same nursery from his dreams. Blood smeared on the walls, a crib overturned, and inside the crib was a doll with human eyes, staring at him, blinking. The doll's mouth opened and whispered, "He watches you now." Ethan screamed, stumbled backward, and the room was gone. He stood in the foyer again, the front door open. He ran. This time no fog. The road was clear. He didn't look back, didn't care where he was going, just away. But every turn took him back. The driveway, the mailbox, the house. It stood waiting, taller, darker, breathing. That night the boy appeared again, not just in the window, in Ethan's room, at the foot of his bed, staring. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't scream. The boy's mouth slowly opened, the stitches unraveling by themselves. Black liquid poured out. From the boy's mouth came a voice not his own. "He has chosen you. You are the gate." The boy crumbled into ash. Ethan passed out. When he woke, a figure stood in the corner of the room. A man in a black coat with no face, just smooth skin where features should have been. He raised a hand and pointed to the mirror. Ethan turned and saw something that shattered him. Not a reflection, an image, a memory. His great uncle 40 years ago, opening the same basement door, standing before the same black void. And beside him, the boy, Joseph, crying, pleading. "Please don't make me," the boy whispered. But the man pushed him into the dark. Ethan fell to his knees. "He fed them to it," the voice inside him said. "And now the debt is yours." That night, Ethan tried to destroy the house. He poured gasoline on the floors, lit matches, but every flame died instantly. The house would not burn, would not let him go. In the reflection of every window, he saw the children now. Not one or two, dozens, pale, stitched, floating just behind the glass, watching, waiting. The next morning, he heard the knock again, this time from inside the fireplace. He tore down the brickwork, coughing in the dust, until he found a small metal box. Inside was a journal, his great-uncle's journal, pages filled with drawings, rituals, instructions, descriptions of the hunger beneath. One entry stood out, written in frantic scrawl. "I thought it would take just one. I thought it would sleep, but it lied. It always lies. The house is just its skin. The real thing is beneath. It eats through memory, through blood. I gave it my brother, and it asked for more. It always asked for more." Ethan read every word. There was a way to trap it, not to kill it. Nothing so old can die, but to contain it again. But it required a sacrifice. Someone had to open the door willingly. Someone had to become the new gate. He understood now why the house had called to him, why it had waited, why it whispered his name. He was the blood link, the heir, the curse passed down. That night the children cried from the walls. The void door opened again, and Ethan stood before it, shaking, broken, the journal in hand. The darkness whispered promises, lies, or maybe truths too horrible to bear. "Come," it said, "feed us, and we will let you go." But Ethan had read the final entry, the last desperate words of a man who had tried to end it and failed. "There is no escape, only delay. Someone must hold the door shut from the other side." And Ethan finally understood what he had to do. Ethan stood frozen at the edge of the void, the journal clenched in one hand, its pages flapping like wings in the unnatural wind, seeping from the open door. He could feel the pull, not physical, not gravitational, but something older, more primal, as if his very essence was being tugged by unseen hooks deep into the endless black. Behind him, the house groaned like a wounded animal. The walls bled fresh streams of dark liquid. Pictures on the walls distorted and melted into grotesque shapes, and the floorboards pulsed like veins. A child's voice echoed down the tunnel from the void, singing a lullaby in reverse. He tried to back away, but his feet were rooted to the ground, not by force, but by dread. The thing beyond the door was alive, and it was watching him, waiting to see what he would choose. Then from the darkness, a shape emerged, not fully visible, more felt than seen, a presence coalescing from shadow and sorrow. It spoke without sound, its meaning bleeding directly into Ethan's mind. "One must hold the gate, or the hunger spreads. Choose." Ethan dropped to his knees, sobbing, the weight of what lay before him crushing every part of his sanity. But just as he leaned forward to accept his fate, to step into the darkness and close the door forever, he heard another voice, familiar, terrified. It was Lily. "Ethan, are you here? Please, I need help." Her voice rang from upstairs. He turned in shock. Lily, his sister. She'd been living 3 states away. Why was she here? He bolted up the basement steps, the air thick with static and the smell of copper. The house twisted around him again. Rooms changed places. Doors led to walls. Mirrors rippled like water. But he followed her voice, chased it through the maze until he burst into what should have been the dining room. She stood there pale, shivering, barefoot, her eyes red from crying. "I got your letter," she whispered. "You said it was urgent, that we needed to talk about Uncle Vernon." Ethan stepped forward, heart pounding. "I didn't send you a letter." Her face changed, twisted slightly, a twitch that wasn't human. Her mouth opened too wide and she screamed, a scream layered with dozens of voices. Then she vanished into dust. The house laughed, a low, guttural sound that came from every wall, every object. It had lied. It always lied. It had learned his memories, his guilt, his hope, and now it used them as bait. But still something lingered. He felt her presence, his real sister's presence, somewhere close. Maybe the house had pulled her in, after all. Maybe the hunger wasn't just within the basement anymore. The thought sent a chill through him. He turned and ran, searching every room. The house stretched now, infinitely wide, corridors that went on for miles, stairs that rose into black ceilings. And in the deepest room, beyond a door made of bone and stitched flesh, he found her. Lily, the real Lily, bound to the wall, floating inches above the ground, her eyes white, her mouth sewn shut. Her body pulsed with the same dark light as the basement. She was the offering, the next sacrifice. "It wants her," a voice behind Ethan rasped. He spun around and saw the faceless man again, tall and unmoving. "But you opened the door. It is bound to you." Ethan screamed and attacked the man, but his fist passed through empty air. "You must choose," the voice echoed. "She or you." The lights went out, and in that darkness he relived everything. The blood in the nursery, the ash in the fireplace, the endless knocking in the walls. But he also remembered the journal, the final line burned into his memory. "If the bloodline ends, the gate will weaken. But if one binds it willingly, the door can be sealed for a time." Ethan knew then what he had to do. He carried Lily to the front door, kicked it open, but the world outside was gone. In its place was a void. The same void from the basement now stretched across the land, swallowing trees, roads, stars. The hunger was spreading. He took her upstairs to the attic, the only place untouched. There he found the circle, a ritual drawn in blood and ash. He laid her down, recited the words from the journal. The house screamed. The walls cracked. The children's voices begged him to stop. The darkness began to rise, boiling up through the floor. It climbed the stairs like a flood. Ethan stood in the center of the circle. The words burned his throat. The shadows clawed at the edge of the chalk. But they could not cross. Not yet. And then it came. The final sacrifice. His blood. The price. He raised the dagger from the box beneath the nursery floor. One cut across the palm. One word spoken in the old tongue. The gate screamed. A light exploded from the circle. The shadows recoiled. The house convulsed, split apart, then vanished. Ethan opened his eyes and found himself in the basement, alone. The door was gone. The void sealed. The air was still. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully on the couch. The house was quiet, normal, for the first time. But Ethan knew it would not last. Nothing this old truly dies. It sleeps. It waits. And now he was the gatekeeper, the vessel. He picked up the journal, now blank, every page white, as if his story had erased all others. Outside, the sun rose. The birds sang. But deep within the earth, something scratched faintly. Waiting. Just waiting. Ethan tried to pretend it was over, but the silence had a sound, and it gnawed at his sanity with every passing second. Days blurred into nights, but the house no longer changed. The walls held steady, the doors stayed where they belonged, and Lily had no memory of what had happened. She believed she had just arrived to visit him after months apart. He didn't dare tell her the truth, didn't dare admit that something ancient and malevolent had tried to consume her soul, and that now he was its prison. But the house knew. It remembered, and so did the shadows. It started small, an object out of place, the scent of burned hair lingering in the bathroom, a child's laugh echoing in the hallway at 3:33 a.m. Ethan didn't sleep. He couldn't. The dreams were gateways, and he knew that if he closed his eyes too long, it would reach through and take something again. He boarded the windows, salt-lined every door, and spoke aloud to the shadows just to keep them still. "I know you're there," he whispered. "I know you're waiting." On the seventh night, Lily screamed. Ethan found her in the kitchen, her eyes wide, hands trembling, pointing at the oven. Inside, a roast chicken sat untouched. She hadn't cooked it. Neither had he. On the counter beside it lay a butcher's knife, still wet with fresh blood. "Someone was in the house," she whispered. "I heard humming. A song. It came from the vents." Ethan checked every lock, every room. The house was sealed. But inside the oven, beneath the roasting pan, he found a folded scrap of paper, old parchment, scorched around the edges. 4 words written in what looked like rusted wire. "You forgot to knock." His hands trembled as he dropped it. The door behind him slammed shut. For a moment he was back in the basement. Back before the ritual, the void breathing down his neck. He turned, just a pantry. But he knew. It had found a way through. The seal was cracking. He spent the next day reinforcing the attic circle. Chalk, salt, runes drawn in his own blood. He spoke words from the journal, hoping they still held power. Lily watched from the doorway, frightened. "Ethan, what's happening? Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. If he told her, she'd never sleep again. That night the house bled. It started with the walls, slow trickles of black-red liquid that oozed from behind wallpaper seams and floorboard cracks. Then the ceiling began to flake, and whispers filled the air vents. Whispers that spoke in the voice of their mother, long dead. Lily collapsed in the hallway, screaming. Her eyes had turned pitch black, her mouth chanting words she couldn't understand. Ethan dragged her into the circle and began the invocation, the house shaking with rage. The shadows pounded at the edge of the circle, clawing, reaching, and then they stopped. Silence. Lily gasped and passed out. Ethan stayed awake, watching, waiting. When morning came, the house was pristine again. No blood, no whispers. But the message had been clear. The seal was failing, and it was his fault. He had tried to contain the hunger, not eliminate it. But something was still tethered to the house, something that wasn't part of the original ritual. He needed answers. That evening he returned to the basement. This time, he brought a mirror, a bowl of ash, and a hair from Lily's comb. He performed the summoning from the last known page of the journal, the page that had rewritten itself the night after the ritual. Smoke filled the room, the lights flickered, and a figure appeared in the mirror. A boy with hollow eyes and no mouth. The same boy from the nursery. "What do you want?" Ethan demanded. The boy pointed upward toward the attic. "The seal?" The boy nodded. "Is it broken?" The boy shook his head, then turned and pointed at Ethan. "Me?" He nodded again. Ethan realized the horror in that moment. The house had not sealed the hunger within itself. It had sealed it in him. He was the prison. And every moment he stayed, every breath he took, every nightmare he survived, it fed it. He stumbled back from the mirror, bile rising in his throat. That's why the shadows never left, why they still lingered. He was no longer just Ethan. He was the vessel. And if he ever left Ashford Lane, the hunger would follow. It needed to be fed, and the house had become the farm. That night Lily found him in the attic, staring into the void of the mirror, bleeding from his eyes. "We have to leave," she said. "I booked us a flight. We can stay with Aunt Carol, somewhere bright, somewhere clean." He didn't speak. He only handed her the journal, now bound shut with twine and sealed in wax. "Don't open it," he said softly. "Not ever." She cried, begged him to come with her. He only smiled. The next morning she left, alone. And the moment her car crossed the town line, Ethan heard the house sigh in relief, or perhaps disappointment. The wind picked up. The lights dimmed. The shadows danced once more. The hunger stirred, and Ethan walked back into the basement to begin the next ritual. Ethan no longer marked the days by sunrises or sunsets. Time had become an illusion inside the house, warped by the hunger that lived beneath its foundations. Without Lily, the rooms echoed with silence too perfect to be real. The walls pressed inward. The windows offered only darkness. He spoke less, moved less, but he listened. The house was always speaking now, through the pipes, through the crackling paint, through the creaks in the floorboards that formed sentences in the language of the dead. He hadn't eaten in 3 days. The hunger wasn't his anymore. It belonged to something older, something cold and endlessly patient. He knew it wouldn't kill him. Not yet. It needed him breathing, twitching, trembling. He was its lighthouse, its gateway. But the house was changing again, not morphing like before. This was subtler. Objects began appearing that didn't belong to him. A pair of muddy boots in the hallway, a half-burned candle on the kitchen table, a child's drawing on the refrigerator of a faceless man and a red-eyed dog. He hadn't drawn them, and he didn't remember buying red crayons. One morning he woke to the sound of shoveling in the backyard. No one was there, but a mound of fresh soil had been unearthed near the tree line. Digging further, he uncovered a small wooden box, wrapped in wire and soaked in something thick and sticky. Inside were teeth, human, baby teeth, each etched with tiny letters that spelled "Feed him." He burned the box in the fireplace, but the teeth returned that night, scattered across his bed like rose petals. When he threw them out again, they returned inside his pillowcase. The house was playing now, testing him, preparing him. He began seeing reflections that didn't match. In mirrors, he stood too still, blinking too late. One evening, he caught his own reflection smiling when he wasn't. He covered all mirrors in the house, but the feeling of being watched grew worse. He heard whispers in the silence, names he didn't recognize, the names of children. Their voices filled the bathtub, the oven, the mailbox. A neighbor came by once, a woman named Carol from 2 doors down. She said she hadn't seen Lily in weeks and was worried. Ethan didn't answer the door, but she peered through the window. Her eyes widened, her lips formed a question, but then her face contorted, twisted into a look of horror, and she stumbled backward. When Ethan finally opened the door, she was gone. Her car still sat in the driveway. Her shoes sat on the welcome mat. But Carol herself had vanished, and the wind carried her name through the trees like a curse. That night, Ethan heard footsteps in the walls. Not mice, not plumbing, running feet. Laughing. Children laughing, chasing something. He followed the sound to the basement. The lights flickered as he descended. At the bottom, the shadows were no longer content to linger. They stepped forward, took shape. Children, dozens of them, translucent, hollow-eyed. They surrounded him, chanted in a language older than the dirt, and opened a space in the center of the floor. A trapdoor, one he had never seen. It wasn't made of wood. It pulsed like skin, and as he touched it, it opened. He descended. Below the basement was a cavern of impossible depth, filled with the hum of 1,000 voices, all crying and singing at once. The walls were covered in drawings, drawn in ash, drawn in blood. They depicted the house over and over, burning, floating, screaming. At the center of the cavern was a stone altar. On it lay a child's skeleton. Beside it, a book bound in flesh. The real journal. Not the one that wrote itself. This one had been hidden, protected. He opened it. Pages written in countless languages, some human, some not. Symbols that bled when touched. Words that whispered their own names. It told the story of a hunger that existed before mankind, a presence that drifted from place to place, always needing a house, always needing a gatekeeper. The last gatekeeper had been a man named Alton Wexler. He had died in 1923, or so the town thought. But the journal explained differently. Alton had failed. The hunger had fed, and now it had chosen a new gatekeeper, Ethan. The journal included instructions, a ritual to end the tether, to break the chain, to close the gate forever. But the price was unbearable. Ethan would have to feed the house one final time. Not blood, not flesh, but a soul willingly offered, one bound by love, one still pure. Lily. He dropped the journal, stumbled back, horrified. He couldn't. He wouldn't. But the house had other plans. The next morning, Lily returned. She stood on the porch, confused, pale, as if something had dragged her there in her sleep. She didn't remember the trip, didn't remember calling him, but she was back, and the house rejoiced. The air grew warm. The floor stopped creaking. The shadows whispered, "Soon!" Ethan locked her in the guest room, not out of cruelty, but to protect her. He tried to run, to escape the house, but every road led back to Ashford Lane. GPS spun in circles, time reset. He drove 5 hours east only to find himself parked in front of his own driveway. The house refused to let go. He realized then he would have to lie, to perform the ritual, to trick the house, to find a way to offer something that felt real without damning Lily. He returned to the basement, began drawing the circle, recited the forbidden words, called out to the shadows to prepare. The altar appeared again, glowing with fire beneath the skin floor. He placed the journal on it. One page burned itself into view. The gate will feed, or the gate will open. That night he held Lily's hands, looked into her eyes and told her the truth. She didn't believe him, thought it was madness, thought he had snapped. But when the shadows began to crawl across the ceiling and her reflection in the window didn't blink, she screamed, and he used the distraction to cut her palm, draw her blood, and whisper her name into the seal. The house roared, the floor cracked, the altar lit with flame, but nothing happened. The house paused, then screamed in rage. It had not accepted the offering. The love had not been true. Ethan collapsed. The walls bled again. Lily was gone, vanished. He searched for days, weeks. Her name echoed in every room. And on the final night, the house showed mercy or cruelty. It returned her, but she was no longer Lily. Her eyes were black, her skin cold. Her voice echoed with a dozen others, and she smiled. "The gate is open," she said. "You didn't feed me." And then the walls peeled back, and the real hunger stepped through. The thing that wore Lily's face stood inches away from Ethan, her smile twisted into something monstrous, something not meant for human eyes. Her blackened gaze shimmered with 1,000 reflections, none of them Ethan's, as if she were a broken mirror showing the souls of those who had dared to look into the abyss before him. Her voice, when she spoke again, echoed from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, all at once, like a choir of the long dead reciting a forgotten hymn. "You brought me back," she said, and every syllable curled inside his stomach like coiled barbed wire. "Now you must watch what I become." Ethan backed away, nearly tripping over the threshold as the hallway around them twisted, expanding and contracting like a living esophagus. Doors once familiar now opened to impossible spaces. One showed a train station lit only by flickering lamps and full of eyeless passengers. Another led into a dense forest where trees had human arms instead of branches. A third pulsed with red light and the sound of breathing. He slammed them all shut, but the house no longer obeyed gravity or structure. Rooms rearranged themselves mid-step. The stairs stretched infinitely downward before snapping back up like rubber bands. Lily, or the creature inside her, stalked after him slowly, never rushing, always just around the next corner, whispering riddles that made no sense and yet struck terror into the deepest part of his soul. "What screams but has no mouth?" she sang. "What dies and still walks?" Ethan tried to reach the front door, but the entryway was gone, replaced by a wall of rotting portraits, his own face drawn over and over in charcoal and bone dust, each version more decayed than the last. He turned and sprinted up what used to be the second floor, now a corridor of glass filled with suspended bodies, some still twitching, their mouths sewn shut with strands of hair. His name echoed from every direction, distorted, layered with malice. He didn't know how long he ran. The house had no time anymore, only hunger. Eventually, he found himself in the attic, except it was no longer dusty and cluttered. It was pristine, blindingly white, filled with childlike laughter. A tea party was arranged in the center, dolls with cracked porcelain faces, seated around a table stained with something dark. Sitting at the head was the thing in Lily's skin. She beckoned him. "One cup," she said, lifting a teacup filled with something that hissed like acid. "One sip, and I show you truth." Ethan refused. He turned to leave, but the attic door vanished, and the dolls stood up, their joints cracking backward, their mouths splitting open far too wide. They began to chant, old names, names carved into the foundations, names from the book. Alton, Miriam, Silas, Ethan, over and over. Ethan clutched the charm he'd found in the journal, a piece of bone wrapped in copper wire, and held it to his chest. The dolls stopped. The house paused. He realized then that the house still had rules. It didn't like the bone. It didn't like what it represented. Old magic, old resistance. So he ran with it, clutched it tighter. The house recoiled as he moved, opening walls to let him pass, as if pushing him somewhere, into its center, into its womb. He descended again, past the basement, past the bleeding walls, down into the earth where roots grew in spirals and the air tasted like copper. At the bottom was a pit, a mouth, pulsing, breathing. It exhaled steam and wet blood. "Feed me," it demanded, not with words but with gravity. Ethan leaned forward and saw hundreds of objects below. Watches, teeth, baby shoes, rings, all offerings from past gatekeepers. Failures. Victims. He raised the bone charm and whispered the final words from the journal. The forbidden invocation meant only for the desperate. The ground shook. The pit howled. The house screamed. Lily's laughter exploded into shrieks. Her body collapsed through the floor, convulsing, distorting, transforming. Her limbs snapped into jagged angles. Her skin shed in sheets. What rose from her corpse was no longer pretending to be human. It had antlers made of wire, a face like melted wax, and a spine that pulsed like a centipede. It screeched once and leapt into the pit. The floor sealed behind it. Silence returned. Ethan collapsed, but it was not over. The house groaned, as if birthing something new. The walls peeled open to reveal a room he had never seen, his own childhood bedroom. Toys on the floor, posters on the walls. Except none of them were his. They were from dozens of lives, dozens of children. He realized this room was a tomb, a trap for spirits. All the children the house had claimed were here, frozen in moments of fear. Some held stuffed animals, some held knives. One girl clutched her own eyes. In the center was a mirror. Ethan approached. His reflection didn't mimic him. It stared back, wide-eyed, panicked. "You have to finish it," the reflection said. "You're almost there." Ethan whispered, "How?" The reflection pointed to a single door that hadn't existed a moment ago. Small, wooden, and marked with a handprint burned into the grain. He opened it. Beyond was not another room but a cliff, a black sky, wind that sang with a million voices. Below the cliff, a sea of faces twisted and turned, moaning in agony. Above, the stars blinked in Morse code, saying, "Free us." Ethan stepped forward, and the bone charm burned in his hand. He understood. To end the house, he had to give it a name. The original name. The one lost in the journal's final torn page. He looked up. The stars shimmered. He whispered the name that had come to him in dreams, one he had never said aloud but had known in his bones. Avarix. The moment the word left his lips, the world fractured. The sky split open like glass under heat. The sea of faces screamed, not in pain, but in hope. The house cried out in defiance, trying to pull him back. He felt its claws on his spine, dragging him toward the threshold. But the charm glowed white. The pit reopened. And from its depth, a voice said, "You will not undo me?" He turned, faced it. "Watch me!" And he jumped. The fall didn't end. Ethan plummeted through darkness that defied every law of space, twisting like an oil-slick void lined with ancient whispers. Time had no shape here, no rhythm. Seconds stretched like centuries while memories shattered around him. His childhood laughter cracked open like a broken record. His mother's lullabies unraveling into indecipherable murmurs, and his dreams flickered through the dark like dying embers. Then, with no warning, his body stopped. Not with a crash, but as if the void itself simply let him go. He stood on solid ground, yet it pulsed with life beneath his feet, like skin stretched over muscle. A cavern loomed ahead, massive and echoing, its walls carved with thousands of symbols. Names of the forgotten, faces of the taken, scratched into the stone with blood and bone. The air was thick, humid, and alive with sounds that didn't belong. Snapping jaws with no mouths, chains dragging across glass, and the slow beat of something enormous breathing just beyond vision. At the far end of the cavern stood a throne, not made of gold or stone, but of writhing limbs and hollow skulls, and upon it sat the true form of Avarix. No longer hiding in shadows or behind Lily's innocent smile, the entity unveiled itself fully, its body both insectile and regal, shrouded in tendrils of despair that fed on the air around them. Its face had no features, just a void where light disappeared, and its voice poured directly into Ethan's mind, bypassing ears and drilling into the marrow of his thoughts. "You speak my name," it said, "but names alone do not bind me. You opened the seal, you fed me, now you finish what others feared to begin." Ethan raised the bone charm, which pulsed with heat against his skin. "I didn't feed you. I exposed you." Avarix laughed, the sound like 100 clocks breaking at once. "Then witness what exposure brings." The cavern walls convulsed. Out from crevices came thousands of shades, souls twisted by the house, malformed remnants of those who had fallen into its trap over centuries. Their eyes glowed faintly, but not with hate, with agony. They reached for Ethan, not to harm, but to plead. Some mouthed his name, others wept soundlessly. He turned, desperate to help, but their hands passed through him, intangible. One child pointed upward, back toward the surface, and Ethan understood. They wanted release, not revenge. Behind him, Avarix rose from its throne, its form shifting into a colossal silhouette that spanned the cavern ceiling. "You would break the wheel?" it hissed. "The wheel built from grief and remembrance?" "Yes," Ethan said, heart pounding. "It ends with me." He drove the charm into the pulsing ground. The reaction was immediate. The earth screamed. Light erupted from the wound, burning white like a newborn star. Avarix shrieked, its form flickering, fracturing. It lunged, but the charm expanded, its magic feeding off every memory Ethan had suffered, every name he had read, every whisper in the walls. The spirits surrounding him began to glow, their chains breaking one by one. They floated upward, ascending through a crack forming in the cavern's roof. Avarix tried to hold them back, its limbs lashing out, but every soul it touched left behind a scar. It began to bleed shadows, its throne collapsing beneath it. Still, it fought on. Tendrils wrapped around Ethan, pulling him into its core. Inside Avarix was a different kind of darkness. Not absence, but memory. He saw the first sacrifice, a pilgrim woman named Altha, her baby taken by a miracle in the woods. He saw the blood pact made by the town elders of Ashford in the 1800s, trading safety from plague for the souls of their kin. He saw Lily's real parents, driven mad by visions, wandering into the forest and never returning. He saw himself, a child chosen long ago, touched by the house before he even knew it existed. He screamed, but not in fear, in defiance. These were not Avarix's memories. They were evidence of suffering, of theft, of lies. He reached into the heart of the entity, grasped the oldest root of its existence, a single phrase etched into the first wall of the house: "The living feed the forgotten." With all his strength, he tore it free. Avarix screamed. The cavern began to collapse, not with violence, but with purpose. Its walls disintegrated into ash. The spirits flew faster, no longer in pain, but radiant with release. The light spread, consuming all. Ethan felt himself dissolving, his body no longer held together by bones, but by intention. He floated, unafraid, surrounded by warmth, memories that didn't hurt anymore. He saw Lily again, smiling, real, her hand brushing his cheek. "You did it," she whispered, "but not alone." He nodded, tears streaking through the light. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you sooner." She shook her head. "You saved what matters." Her image faded. The last thing Ethan felt was peace, then blackness, cold, sharp breath. He awoke gasping on the floor of the Ashford house, now silent. Daylight spilled through shattered windows. The air was stale but free of the oppressive weight it once carried. The house was empty, truly empty. No whispers, no shadows, just dust in the wind. He stood slowly, bones aching, heart thudding, and stepped outside. The forest behind the house was green again, not gray. Birds chirped. The sky was blue, but the peace was fragile. As he looked back, the front door of the house creaked, even though no wind touched it. On the threshold, a new symbol had appeared, etched into the wood by invisible hands. A spiral, incomplete. The house was not gone, only dormant. Ethan knew what that meant. Averix was weakened, wounded, maybe even buried, but not destroyed. He had ended the cycle, for now. But something darker stirred beneath the surface. Something older than even the house, and far away in another town, another child had begun to dream of doors that opened on their own. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the spiral symbol carved deep into the ancient wood. Though the morning sun cast warm light over the old house, an unsettling chill crept up his spine. The spiral was incomplete, jagged, and it pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. It was a warning, a promise, or perhaps a curse. The house, now silent and seemingly lifeless, still held secrets darker than any shadow he had faced. The townsfolk of Ashford had long whispered about the sleeping house, saying it could never truly be destroyed, only tamed, temporarily subdued. Ethan had believed he was the one to finally break its curse, to free the souls trapped within. But standing there, heart pounding, he understood that the house was more than a haunted building. It was a living entity, bound to the land, growing and changing, waiting for the right moment to awaken once more. Days passed since his harrowing escape. Ethan tried to return to normal life, but the nightmares haunted him relentlessly. Visions of doorways opening into endless voids. Voices calling his name in languages long dead. In Lily's face, sometimes serene, sometimes twisted in anguish. At night, the spiral symbol would glow faintly in his dreams, beckoning him back. Unable to resist, Ethan returned to the house, hoping to find answers, or at least closure. As he approached, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The path, once choked with brambles, was now strangely clear. Stepping inside, he found the rooms restored to their former sinister beauty. Dust swept away, shadows shifting just beyond the edge of vision. The house whispered to him in memories and half-formed thoughts. He followed the voices down the familiar twisted hallways, each step heavier than the last. In the basement, a new door had appeared, carved with the same spiral but now glowing with an eerie blue light. Ethan hesitated but pushed it open, revealing a staircase spiraling downward into a realm of pure darkness. The air smelled of wet earth and decay, thick with the promise of forgotten horrors. Descending, Ethan found himself in a cavern beneath the house, larger than any underground chamber should be, filled with roots that pulsated like veins and walls that seemed to breathe. At the center was a massive altar, covered in ancient runes and symbols Ethan had never seen before. Resting atop it was a book, bound in something soft and pale that shifted like skin. As he reached for it, the room trembled and the shadows coalesced into a figure. It was neither Averix nor Lily, but something older, darker, a shadow with countless eyes, watching, judging, waiting. "You awaken the deeper darkness," it said, voice like the scraping of bones. "The hunger beneath the hunger." Ethan swallowed hard but stood his ground. "I don't want to awaken anything," he said, clutching the bone charm tight. "I want to end this." The shadow laughed, a sound that twisted the air. "Endings are illusions. Every end births a beginning." The house is but one face of the ancient hunger that feeds on fear and memory. You freed the surface. Now I am the core. The book opened itself, pages fluttering with voices from centuries past. Ethan saw glimpses, rituals older than Ashford, sacrifices made by forgotten tribes, an eternal pact with darkness itself. The house was a prison, yes, but also a beacon, calling to this deeper force. There is a way, the shadow whispered, but it demands a sacrifice. Not a life, but a legacy. One who binds themselves forever, who becomes the new guardian, holding the hunger at bay. Ethan's mind reeled. Was this his fate? To become the jailer of this darkness, trapped in eternal vigilance? The shadow reached out, its many eyes focusing on him, waiting for his answer. He glanced back the way he came, the stairway that led to light, to freedom, to a life untouched by madness, but also a life haunted by the knowledge that what he fought might return. Ethan's hand closed around the charm. "If I must, I will," he said, voice steady despite the terror. "I will protect the world from what you are." The shadow smiled, a cruel, knowing smile. "So be it." A blinding light filled the chamber, searing through Ethan's body and soul. He felt his essence stretch, intertwined with the house, the forest, and the land itself. The hunger whispered promises of power and knowledge, but also chains. He was becoming something new, part human, part guardian, bound to the eternal fight against darkness. Outside, the house shuddered one last time before settling into a deep, unnatural silence. The spiral on the door glowed brightly, then faded, leaving only a faint scar. Ethan emerged from the depths, changed forever. He could feel the house's presence inside him, a cold pulse echoing his heartbeat. He was both prisoner and protector now, a silent sentinel standing between the living and the darkness beneath Ashford Lane. The townsfolk would never know his sacrifice, and the house would never fully rest. Somewhere, deep beneath the earth, the ancient hunger waited, and Ethan would wait with it, forever. Years passed, but Ethan's story remained hidden beneath layers of silence and forgotten memories. Ashford Town grew, modernized, and the old house on Ashford Lane stood as a relic, dismissed by most as an abandoned ruin, haunted only by rumors. But Ethan never left. Bound by the ancient pact, his existence blurred between the mortal world and the shadow beneath. He became a ghost in his own right, seen by none, heard by fewer, but always watching, always waiting. The hunger pulsed within him, a constant reminder of the darkness's weight. Sometimes it whispered, tempting him with visions of power beyond human reach. Other times, it threatened to consume him entirely. But Ethan held fast. His mind sharpened, learning the language of the shadows, the signs that foretold when the house would stir, when the hunger would awaken once more. One cold autumn evening, a young woman named Claire arrived in Ashford, a researcher drawn by local legends of haunted places and forgotten folklore. She was determined to uncover the truth about the house, to bring light to the darkness that had haunted generations. Claire was fearless, driven by curiosity and a stubborn hope that the past could be understood and healed. She walked the streets, interviewing old residents, collecting tales of strange noises, vanished pets, and eerie lights flickering in the dead of night. Her research led her inevitably to Ashford Lane. As she approached the house, the air grew thick and heavy, shadows bending unnaturally around her. The spiral symbol had faded, but a faint glow still lingered on the doorframe. Ethan watched her from the shadows, silent and unseen, weighing the risk of revealing himself. That night, Claire set up camp near the house, her recorder capturing every creak and whisper. As darkness fell, the house seemed to breathe, exhaling a cold wind that wrapped around her like a shroud. Suddenly, the front door creaked open on its own. Claire stepped inside, heart pounding but determination unwavering. Inside, the house was alive with memories, flickering images of past horrors and fleeting glimpses of hope. She felt a presence, watching, waiting, and then she saw him. Ethan, neither fully man nor shadow, his eyes glowing faintly with the weight of centuries. "You should not be here," he said, voice low and haunting. Claire, surprised but unafraid, replied, I came for answers, to understand the darkness. Ethan studied her, sensing something different, strength, compassion, and a light that had not been extinguished. The house is not just a place of fear, he said. It is a prison, a guardian, and a warning. The hunger beneath is endless. I hold it at bay, but one day I will fail. Claire stepped closer, her voice steady. Then I will help you. Together. For the first time in centuries, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. The bond that held him prisoner might become a bridge, a chance to fight the darkness with light, to break the cycle rather than just endure it. Over days and nights, they explored the house's secrets, unlocking ancient symbols and forgotten rituals. Claire's modern knowledge combined with Ethan's cursed insight forged new paths, ways to strengthen the barrier, to heal the land, and to protect future generations. But the hunger was cunning. It whispered lies, sowed distrust, and reached through the shadows to claw at their resolve. One night, as the full moon bathed the house in silver light, the hunger made its move. Shadows spilled into the town, twisting faces into nightmares, turning friends into foes. Ethan and Claire fought side by side, wielding light and ancient rites against the encroaching darkness. The battle was fierce, testing their strength and will. In the end, they sealed the hunger once more, but not without cost. Ethan's form weakened, the curse binding him, unraveling slowly. Claire, too, felt the toll. Her eyes darkened with secrets only the house could share. As dawn broke, Ethan looked at Claire and whispered, This is only the beginning. The house on Ashford Lane stood quiet once more, its secrets safe but not silenced. The hunger lurked beneath, waiting for the next time the spiral would be drawn, the next soul to be chosen. Ethan had passed the torch, but the fight was eternal. Claire stepped outside into the morning light, forever changed. She knew her life would never be the same, that shadows from the house would follow her wherever she went. Yet she also carried hope, a chance to end the curse for good, or at least to fight it with courage and love. Ashford's tale was far from over. The house remained, a dark sentinel watching over the town, waiting, always waiting. And in the quiet moments, when the wind stirred the trees just right, you could hear a faint whisper, an echo of those who had fallen, those who had fought, and those who still watched, guarding the thin line between the living and the forgotten.